What's up, guys? The Wednesday Link. We're here, and yes, just a little bit late. 6 minutes, but it's a bye week for everyone, so we get a bye week. No, I mean everybody
Sure.
knows it. I would be running behind schedule maybe a little bit as well. But Thomas, how you doing? It's a Eagles bye week.
It's an early Eagles bye week. It's really strange, right? It feels like there should be a game on Sunday, and yeah, I think most of us are happy there isn't a game on Sunday because of how bad they've looked. And so I think there's a lot to talk about tonight, Josh, and a lot of stuff that maybe is not on the football field, which is a little bit upsetting.
Yes, just a bit. And we're gonna get into all of that. Also, shout out to everybody in the chat. Appreciate you guys. Hit the like button if you're not already. Appreciate you hanging out. Tyler T saying first time made it for a live show. Saying we're
Hey,
gonna pull it together and end the season 12-4. Let's go
12
birds. Go
4.
birds.
I
Appreciate
love
you, Tyler.
the
Love the
positivity,
optimism. Yep.
Josh. How about
Yep.
that? Jeez.
Definitely the optimism there. But appreciate you hanging out. I'm trying to, like fully, because we had this conversation, I think it was last week or maybe the week before that, but like your comment of eternal optimist, eternal pessimist, like the sides that we go back and forth and how people may want to, try to brand us or clarify on that side. But ultimately, when you look at this team and we're going into the bye week, we've talked about it on our shows individually, the game recaps going back and forth, like there's difficulty to kind of be like, yeah, but like, yeah, they can turn a corner. Yeah, maybe we can see this thing. And you're trying to
Yeah.
rationalize it. But right now, from what we've seen, yes, it's a blessing in disguise. I think most of us would agree with it. The bye week being early. Is there hope? Are there things that we're seeing that this team can potentially turn a corner and get things fixed?
Um, yes, and I agree with Cool Rains, who just said we have an easy run, should win the next four. I'm sure we'll get into the schedule because it is
Hmm.
easy. But, you know, I, you being the eternal optimist, I'm the eternal pessimist. I'm trying to be optimistic because we're only 4 weeks in, right? And people can change, teams can flip on a dime. You've seen people go on crazy runs the latter half of the year. My biggest problem, kind of sitting back during this bye week, watching a lot of the games, recaps and watching some people's all 22 film breakdown, is this feels like the 2023 Eagles, except for they have Saquon Barkley and a slightly more competent, or maybe a slightly more in control offensive coordinator. It feels exactly the same. I mean, honestly, Jalen Hurts is not playing well. And that's the problem
Hmm.
mainly right now that everything stems from. Hurts is not playing well. The offensive line obviously has injury issues. Of course, there's injury issues at the wide receiver spot as well. The backup wide receivers aren't playing well. The defensive line, much like the latter part of last year, not playing well. Linebackers are extremely hit or miss, which they kind of were last year. I think they're a little better this year. And the secondary, it's better, but C.J. Gardner-Johnson's not been fantastic. Darius Slay likes to run his mouth
Yeah.
about his career stats versus what he did versus Mike Evans and Chris Godwin. And it seems like Nick Sirianni is still running the whole show, Josh, which is probably the most frustrating part. So I think we can. This is a better roster than last year. This should be a better football team than last year. The Eagles have the 32nd ranked strength of schedule left in the National Football League. It should all be fine. But the problem is I was expecting to see a 2022 version of this team come back to life. And instead, I'm seeing kind of like a 2023 team with some extra makeup on, right? You just dress the clown up a little bit nicer. I don't know. I'm not very optimistic today. Shocker, but maybe you are.
I mean, I'm trying to be, but yes, there's so many points on that. But when you do look at it and we talk about like the different motion numbers and everything else, the Eagles were expected, and especially from game one, right? In Brazil against the Packers, the motion percentage was like 60,
Looking
what,
good.
63% or something. It was crazy. And
Yep.
then you come away from that, and now the Eagles are sitting at 19th in the NFL based on motion rates. It's just continued to plummet. Now, I can understand a little bit of argument because people want to say, well, okay, they don't have all the playmakers. So, you have to kind of dumb it down. You have to be a little bit more
Okay.
basic and everything. But at the same time, like Kellen Moore did this in LA with the Chargers, and he had a lot of injuries that took place, but he still finished the year 8th in motion. So
Yep.
it's not a great argument. There's not a great case to be made. We could talk about Jahan Dotson as well. There's several different facets of this that I'm trying to wrap my head around of like, okay, you know what? To your point of the schedule is easy. In fact, if we have it, I think I've got the graphic here. If you're looking at the easiest schedule based on just strength of schedule and rankings there, let me see. There we go. Yeah, I found that.
There you
Um,
go.
it is the easiest for the Eagles. So, you take a look at all the teams here, ranked hardest to easiest. So that 32 number there is a good thing. The Eagles are the easiest out of all of them. I mean, you got the Colts next to it, the Patriots, the Dolphins, the Saints, but
Yeah.
you're nowhere up there. Like the Cowboys have the fourth hardest schedule remaining. The Giants have the third hardest schedule remaining. So it would be a much worse situation to be in if we were one of those teams within the division. But still, yeah, you've seen some things where like it does feel very similar. We're seeing a Fangio defense that, okay, yes, Sean Desai ran a flavor of Fangio defense, but the thought was we're going to get a little bit of differences, right? The godfather of his own scheme and system.
Yeah.
So, but we haven't seen that so far. And there's questions of, you go back to the game this past week against the Bucs, and yes, players don't make plays, but there's also a lot of times where guys are not in right situations or not in the right spaces. And it's a little bit alarming, I suppose, as far as Fangio's comments and saying like, "Oh, it was surprising that they came out with the Bucs
I
did
was
with a
waiting for you
quick
to say it.
pass," right? Like,
Yep. Yep.
hang on now. If we've seen anything over the last certainly 2 years, but more than that, but certainly 2 years, if you want to beat a Fangio defense, the first attempt that you try to make is see if they're going to give you the short, quick passes. Because if they are, then you don't have to do anything else. So I'm like, man, that doesn't. Most of the time, it's like a brutally honest answer from Fangio. I appreciate that. I want to get some info, some clarity. That one to me was probably the most disappointing to hear. Not that it can't be fixed, but it's like, really, you didn't anticipate the Bucs might come out and try to do a quick game for you? I don't know. That's kind of surprising.
Well, and then his answer was, well, why didn't you adjust? And he said, well, we should have moved our cornerbacks closer up. We should have pressed better, which, by the way, Philly's the least pressed team. They're the team that uses the least amount of press man coverage in the entire National Football League, in a modern league. That's pretty crazy. I don't know. It just, again, I want to be positive. I think this team can definitely go on a run. But I watched the tape against, and again, we're not film guys. I said every single show, we're not film guys. But Jalen Hurts is not 2022 Jalen Hurts right now. He's holding the football too long. Every single one of his interceptions, or really fumbles as well, have come when he holds the ball past 3 seconds, which is just a big no-no in the National Football League. I think a couple, like the Xavier McKinney one early in that Packer game was like 3.5, 4 seconds. The one to Jesse Bates was like 6 seconds. There, he's holding the ball too long, and he's just missing some open reads. And then you go to the defense and you watch them just get shredded up and down, and they're not making adjustments, Josh. That's the crazy part, is that I think they have enough talent. I really do. Like, if you were to take the exact talent that we have and put them on a competently coached roster or team, I think they'd be much better. And that's where I'm kind of hung up right now. And again, we harp on Sirianni a lot, and maybe deservedly so, maybe not. It's so hard for you and I and the fans watching the show to know how bad Sirianni is, because in my mind, he like goes to Kellen Moore and says, yeah, let's just do this. Or in the middle of a drive, he says, yeah, well, let's just do this. Like, he's really sabotaging. But if that was the case, I mean, there would be a real mutiny inside the locker room, right? If the players really felt like Nick Sirianni was screwing them over, that he was the reason that they are losing these football games, you would see a much bigger mutiny than Jalen Hurts saying that we have our moments, was that one clip we all kind of jumped on from the past press conference. So
right.
I don't know. It's just, I still feel like they have the talent. They have a much better cornerback opposite of Darius Slay, who I'm sure we'll talk about. C. Johnson is struggling in tackling and coverage, but he still is better than where they were last year. I think the linebackers have flashed from basically 2 of the 4 games so far. The pass rush is a massive problem, but that was a massive problem last year, right? You still won, 11, 12 games in the end there. I think it was 11. I'm blanking right now, but I don't know. It's just very interesting. And I see Philly Mike OG saying the Eagles are going to be 10-7. And that's kind of where I'm feeling based on their, resume and their record and who they're going to play the next couple of months.
Which 10-7, I mean,
Which is
not that
fine.
anyone necessarily signed up for that in the beginning, but it
Sure.
is probably enough to win you the division. I mean, let's be honest. We talked about this division before, and I mean, I guess depending on where you're at with the Commanders, so we could go there. But still, like, you look at this division, and so far, I would say, well, okay, 10-7 could much more realistically get this thing done this year than opposed to other situations, because you have the Giants, you have the Cowboys, and I mean, they're a train wreck. You look at their injuries, they're barely getting things done on both sides of the ball, especially when you look at the rankings. I mean, they're like dead last in the run game. They can't stop the run to save their lives. So it's on both facets, but it's not like we're the only ones in the division that is struggling, and everyone knows that. But you got the Giants, you got them, Commanders. Okay, yeah, they're doing something, but it is one of those where I would say you've got a lot of pieces offensively. I'm not super concerned.
I'm not
Maybe
either.
that's, I know there's some people that you see it, and Jalen for sure, you can't hold on to the ball like you have been. But it kind of goes back and forth because it's not completely all on Jalen. Everyone understands that. There's some
Sure.
turnovers that, fine, it wasn't his mistake. There are others where whether it's hero ball, whether it's just holding on to it too long to begin with, or he's just trying to force something and be aggressive. It's come back to bite the Eagles, and they have not won a game by double digits in, I think it's like the last 15 games. It's
Goodness
something
gracious.
ridiculous. It hasn't,
Yep.
usually you have this type of talent, we would be saying like, oh, hey, you know what? That team can actually go back there and do it. But it's time and time and again, whether it's turnovers to kill a drive, whether it's something within momentum or just a boneheaded mistake and penalties. Every single time we're sitting here and we're going like, oh, there you go. Great. You know what? Drive was moving well until it wasn't. And so they definitely have to get that fixed up. So you're right about Sirianni. I mean, if the players, if there's even an inkling of the players not wanting him there, he's gone. Like
Yeah.
he's already got a short leash.
100%.
He will be gone if that's the case. So far, they've had his back. They did last season, but they've had his back this year. Talking in press conference, what they've said. I can't imagine we're going to see anything, but you look at this easy strength of schedule coming up, and I say easy. I know people are like, oh, it's the NFL and what we've seen so far from the team. Yeah, you're right. If the Eagles play like they have these first 4 games, it won't matter. It's going to
Right.
be terrible. You'll win a couple of them, but it's going to be bad. But if you see a team that you expect and hope to see, plus you have the guys getting back from injuries, then okay, you could get a run, you could make a run at this thing. But if not, then Sirianni, yeah, I mean, his days are numbered. Shout out to Nate Perone. Let me get to some of these super chats too. The 5 there says, "Let's go, Bird Gang. I like Slay, but I don't love him. Q could take his
Let's
spot,
talk about that.
in my
We'll
opinion."
talk about it.
Yep.
Sure.
Sucks. It feels the same as last year. Vrabel would be a good head coach for real for us. Or
I don't
yeah,
hate that. I
for
don't
us.
hate that. I would rather right now, and again, we shouldn't be talking about coaches because if they go on a run, it's going to look stupid going back, whoa, they were talking about coaches week 4. But
Sure.
if I had to pick one right now, it would be Vrabel with a smart offensive-minded guy. I think Ben Johnson also is a name that makes a ton of sense. But and this kind of maybe leads us into the Slay stuff when you finish with the super chats. It feels like you need that adult in the room, and Vrabel kind of brings you that, at least I would assume. Whereas Ben Johnson, we don't really know. I assume he's more of an adult than Sirianni. I think a lot of people are. But if I had to pick right now and I couldn't get Ben Johnson, I think Vrabel would be that name.
Yeah, I agree. I've said Ben Johnson as well because I think that it makes sense from the offensive side. But if you want a disciplinary guy, for sure, you sign him up. Maybe the Eagles go. I'm not as big of a fan of the Belichick, and I know that that one's been brought up as well.
I'm not either. Yeah.
It does seem like it's a fairly realistic option. You go back and forth of saying, does the front office want to, give away that much power to Bill
Yeah.
Belichick of what he would command? But it's like, man, you also look at the reports and say, it feels like Belichick is kind of, that's where this thing's been pushed or leaning towards him
Yep.
for whatever reason. So that's another name that continues to be out there that I think is a realistic option. Not that it's our favorites, but if you did go the offensive, like let's get some creativity in here. I love the idea of a Ben Johnson or someone to that sort because we talk about it, right? Bobby Slowick. If you have a revolving door, that's the worst case scenario. But if all of a sudden, hey, great, we've got a guy who, even if he doesn't always have to call the plays, he can be the offensive mastermind, and you can keep having these offensive coordinators get poached, and it's not going to kill you, and you have to start over again, which is the totally opposite scenario that we're doing with Nick Sirianni. But nonetheless, we're not there yet, as you said, so we're not going to fully dive in there. These 2 other ones, real quick. Jamar, appreciate the 2. Said Thomas. The last 2 fumbles was on the O-line, as far as Jalen and the turnovers.
The one in Tampa was on the O-line? What? I don't agree with that. Saquon picked up his man. Jalen swims by him. That ball has to come out. I mean, what does Jalen think? That an all-world linebacker just kind of disappeared into the ether behind him? No, as soon as he flies by you, he's going to turn around and try and get you. And again, that goes to him holding onto the football too long. Not the offensive line's fault. And the other one dating back to, when was that other one? Well, there was another one in the Bucs game, but the other one he lost in that Falcon game, right? He's holding on the ball too long, he's running away with it, and then chopped through the Saints game, whichever one it was. There's been 8 of them in the first 4 games. No, the turnovers are Jalen holding onto the football way too long. There has not been a turnover this year, Josh, that really has not been Jalen Hurts' fault. I can't think of one really at all. Maybe the Smitty, Jesse Bate one, but it's like you're still throwing against an all-pro safety, and it wasn't that great an idea. He had Eddie Dotson open in that pass. I think they've all been Hurts' fault.
Okay. The one where Smitty crossing the safety's fate, Matthew, I mean, He's putting it in a pretty good spot.
Tyron.
Yeah, Tyrann Mathieu. Like
Okay.
I
Okay,
think
so
for
1 out of
sure that
7?
one's not his. I would give you the Packers ones, both of them. I don't agree that AJ comes back and makes that play even if
Nope.
he doesn't
Still a
slip. I
bad
think that
throw.
one's a bad throw across the field. Um, yeah, I'd have to go back and think through. I might be forgetting one, but for sure, at least one of
There's a
them.
lot of them.
There's a lot that he's holding onto the ball. The pressure percentage is weird too because I got that number thrown at me of like, oh hey, the Eagles pressure rates because Brett Coleman had posted it and saying like the Eagles are allow 40% pressure on
Sure.
Jalen's dropbacks, but it's like okay, yes, but then there's also an element of it of okay, how much comes into play with
How long is he
Jalen
holding it?
holding on to the football for
Yep.
forever. Because if you hold on to it for 3 seconds, then you'll probably get a pressure on just about every single throw. So I don't know where that comes into play, but yes, there's an element to it with Jalen holding on to the football, definitely with turnovers, the internal clock. There's times where it's like, man, if you stop the film, there's guys open. And I think it goes back to also some trust factors, which is understandable because a lot of these guys here, he's not played very many, if any, games before with the receiving core because he's had his guys out. But you see him, he'll drop back and you're like, oh, there's Jahan Dotson. He could have hit him. Could have hit him over the middle. He dropped
doesn't
back
like
and
Jahan
hey,
Dotson.
I mean,
He
honestly, I
has
don't know that
he
I don't know he has any trust.
John Dotson, which is a little crazy because I saw a stat today, Josh. Speaking of pass rush win rate or whatever pressure rate, John Dotson has had the best separation of any Eagle receiver so far this year from his defender, according to ESPN Next Gen Stats, whatever the heck that means. So
Was it
he's
just
creating
was it the Bucks
opportunities.
game or was it all I think it was just the
Was it just
Bucks
the Bucks
game.
game? Well, he didn't throw away the Bucks game
No, no,
anyway.
you're right.
So
Yes, the Bucks game he did not. But I think that holistically, there were two different ones. But yes, within the Bucks game,
okay.
there were like 3 or 4 throws that he could have gone his way, and he
And
goes a different
sure,
route.
like trust is one thing, but eventually it's like, who else do you want to trust, right? You want to trust John Ross? Is that who you're, you're really trusting is John Ross? You're going to trust Johnny Wilson at this
Paris
point?
Campbell is
Paris Campbell, like I just don't buy it. So,
right.
but again,
Yeah,
listen, I am not anti Jalen Hurts. There are people in the comment section of all of our videos who are saying Jalen Hurts is done. He's not the guy. He's Carson Wentz 2.0. We're not there. The
hmm
problem is we have seen what Jalen Hurts is capable of, and now we are wondering how close back to that can you get. And I know that there is obviously a juxtaposition to Carson Wentz, who had a very similar track where he was at the top of the world, came back down. But I've always said about that magical 2019 or 2017 year for Carson Wentz, go back and watch the highlights from that year. Carson Wentz makes a lot of crazy plays that are not
Oh,
that you could not duplicate, right?
for sure.
Just where he ducks out of a tackle versus the Washington Commanders, or he throws that touchdown pass to Miles Sanders in the backfield. Like there's a lot of crazy throws that you just knew he wasn't going to be able to duplicate.
hmm
Jalen's the opposite. Jalen's entire 2022 season is very do-over or whatever the word is. He will be able to do it again. How close can he get? That to me is not the main issue though of Jalen Hurts' play. The defensive play is basically the main problem that we're talking about right here.
hmm
But still, I've defended Jalen Hurts tooth and nail basically his entire career, trying very little to call him out because I think he's been really great. But I think we're at the point where you've got to call him out on a lot of these mistakes because he is definitely making them.
Yeah, I mean, he would even say the same thing in his press conference. He's like,
Sure.
hey, I'm not being good enough. He talked about being
Yeah.
a distributor. I got to be better. I can appreciate that. He's been more talkative in press conferences and sharing kind of what's either going on in his mind, what's going on in the field. But yes, he's got to be better about it. There's times I think where it's like, just try to do too much. You have the talent on this roster, not the last couple games, but when they're healthy, and
Yeah.
that'll be the big question because Packers game, whatever, first game, Russ didn't get any practice in the preseason, didn't get to play, so we could talk about that. But it's like, get the guys back, pass the bye. You have your full roster. You have your full culmination of talent on the offensive side.
Yeah.
What does he do there? Because he doesn't need to be elite. He doesn't need to be through the roof like best quarterback in the league. He could
Nope.
be, but he doesn't have to be. He could be just good, and you have more than enough playmakers, and you have more than a good enough offensive line to be perfectly fine, to be back in that
Yeah.
scenario. So that'll be the question. Can he do that? Does he deliver the ball more effectively, quickly there? War, appreciate the 5. Said Brown's defense is still good. Nick Chubb is returned to
It
practice.
is.
We can
Yep.
easily lose that game.
You could. You easily
True.
could. And it's at the link, the Boo Birds would come down. I think if they look bad against the Browns, that Nick Sirianni would get axed. It'd be
I mean,
very,
probably. Coming off
very
the bye week.
hard for him to survive if it's bad. And like like the Bucs game was really bad. The other 3 games that Philadelphia had played, they had moments in every single one of those games. And obviously they won 2 of them, but they should have won the Falcon game. There was, some bad, but a lot more good. The Bucs game was the first way more bad than there was actually good. And that's why if he has another one of those, it's going to be a very short leash. And I think it's going to be, basically at that point. So we'll see. You want to talk about Darius Slay? I saw some people asking, are we still mad at Darius Slay? And
Yeah. We should do that. Let me. There's 2 real quick. I don't want to miss so we get too far away. But 2 more super chats real quick. One more from Warv. Said Bill would be a great coach for Jalen, but not so much for the team. So we talk about the head coach situation there.
Would he be a great coach for Jalen? Has he had like positive
That's
quarterbacks besides Brady?
That's the question, because the whole Tom Brady thing that we talk about is like, who made who, right? Is it good players or great players make great coaches? Great coaches make great players. Usually seems to be the case of the great player makes the great coach. Not always. I mean, there's great coaches out there, but I don't know. That one to me, because ultimately you'd be hiring a head coach. I believe you'd be hiring a head coach to say, who can he bring in to then help Jalen Hurts? Like he'd have a say, but I don't think that Bill Belichick's the one that you're hiring in to go, yep, he's the Jalen Hurts whisperer. It'd be more so he's the defensive whisperer, maybe, hopefully, but then get somebody else to help out Jalen. So Ishmael here, last other one before we get into the Slay comment. Appreciate the 5 said, I would love John Gruden. He has some Philly love in him. What's going on with Devin White? So,
John Gruden has a YouTube channel. Did you know that? He has he's got a pretty fun YouTube channel.
Does he really? Actually, I don't know that I knew that.
Yes, he does. He has a YouTube channel. I think he does film breakdown. It's called Gruden Loves Football. I'm looking at it right now. 151,000 subscribers.
That's original. Okay.
But yeah, his Seahawks Lions Monday Night Football preview, 126,000 views, and it's just him in front of a whiteboard doing John Gruden stuff. So I don't know. We'll see.
Interesting.
I don't know if he's the right pick, because again,
right,
because you need a good defense. You also need a good quarterback. Yeah, it's tough. It's tough. I would lean towards going more offensive minded, because we've always done that, but there's something about the discipline. I think it's just because of the whole Slay stuff, where you sit back and you go, man, I just wish this team had some discipline, some physicality to it, some no nonsense, to it, because it's just getting old at this point.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And it's a perfect segue into this, because and he mentions Ishmael mentions Devin White, because we discipline the Devin White tweet during the game. The retweet supposed to be a heart, not a retweet, whatever you want to believe, but Levante David on the sack for Jalen Hurts, and he goes ahead and does that during the game. He's not at the game, but he still did it. And so it's a couple different things. You see that, but Slay's, to me, was the most ridiculous. And we do need to mention this because there's a lot of comments. I did the live stream last night and kind of went off a little bit more out of character, I will say, because people were like, oh wow, like Josh is actually getting fired up, and that it must have taken a lot for me to do that. But I'm sorry, like when you call out your own teammate, or even just mildly, throw some shade, hopping on it. It's one thing to hop on the podcast with Micah Parsons. Like I don't agree with it, but that's not what I have a beef with. People are like, oh, he could do that. That's fine. He can do, It's the team aspect. It's the captain approach and the optics that it gives off, combined with the history that we've seen. So I'm curious, because again, I'm sure a lot of people that are hanging out got to hear last night. But your take on the Slay situation, impact for the defense, just all of it.
Well, first off, let's just say this. I am probably the last remaining Eagles content creator not blocked on Twitter by Darius Slay, because he blocked you, right? And he blocked you pretty recently.
He did, yes. He blocked me this morning.
So, well, there you go. Which means he's.
I made it.
He's looking. He's listening. He hears this stuff.
I guess so.
I think all of them. I mean, I think every single content creator and a lot of media people are blocked. I am not. It's simply because I haven't trashed him on Twitter yet. I'm sure if I put out one negative tweet about Darius Slay, I would get instantly blocked. And maybe I need to kind of get the, my access into this elite club of being blocked by an Eagle player. My problem is not going on Micah Parsons' podcast. My problem, honestly, is a lot less the laughing at C.J. Gardner-Johnson. It's the context in which he's doing it that is the real problem, because they just lost, right?
Mm-hmm.
And C.J. Gardner-Johnson is this boy. My biggest problem is going on Twitter literally an hour after you got cooked. Your entire defense got shredded just an hour ago by Baker Mayfield and company and posting your career stats. Like, in what world does that make any sort of sense? And you go, okay, yeah, so we just lost Josh. I didn't have a great game. I wasn't that great. I got beat for another touchdown.
Hmm.
You know what? I'm a I'm a Pro Bowl cornerback. I mean, look at these stats, right? I mean, come on, I've had a really good career.
I
So
mean, come on.
remember that when you talk bad about nobody gives a bleep about what Darius Slay has done in his career an hour after getting cooked by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Nobody
No.
cares. There's not a person alive who bleeds green that cares 1 second about Darius Slay 4 years ago when he was a perennial Pro Bowler with the Detroit Lions. We don't care.
Hmm.
Be good now. Be good now. And it's getting to the point where I'm seeing more and more comments, Josh, of people wanting to, at this point, either bench Darius Slay or trade him because we want to see what we have in Isaiah Rodgers and Keely Ringo. And I don't know if I'm fully at that point because I still have a ton of respect for Darius Slay, and I understand he is and can be easily our best cornerback, although Quinyon is definitely kind of nudging up there. He can
Hmm.
be a great player. But if you keep laying eggs, and then you keep taking to Twitter and pretending like you're this great player when I just watched you lay an absolute egg, I kind of want to see what Zay has for us because Zay could be a long-term player for Philadelphia. Darius Slay's done after this year. He's not going to be an Eagle after this year. Isaiah Rodgers could be signed right now on a very team-friendly 3-year contract that makes Isaiah Rodgers happy and us happy, and he could turn out to be a Pro Bowler. We don't know. Same goes for Keely Ringo on a rookie contract. He could get in there, a couple weeks of actually being the starter, first team reps. He could be really good. We don't know. And so if Darius Slay is going to take the reps away from the future at cornerback for Philadelphia, not play well, and then say it's our fault for noticing on Twitter, you're just going to rub people the wrong way. And that's kind of where I'm at right now. Now, I don't hate against Darius Slay. Please don't block me. I still think you're great. I still want to call you Big Play Slay. But if we're being honest, Josh, the last really great Darius Slay game was 2 years ago, Monday Night Football, Week 2 versus the Minnesota Vikings and
It
Kirk Cousins.
was.
That was kind of the
Yes.
last Big Play Slay day, right? When he shut down Justin Jefferson. They really haven't seen that, or at least we haven't in the past 2 years. There's been
No.
flashes. There's been glimpses. That was kind of the last Big Play Slay day.
He's had 2 interceptions in the last 31 games.
A lot of games.
Don't know
Big
what else
play.
to say. 2 interceptions in the last 31 games and 121.5 passer rating allowed, which is, by the way, like depending on what we want to do metrics wise, either the 3rd worst or the 6th worst corner in the NFL this season. So, yeah, like the stats prove it, and it's already at that level. Reese's Buff was saying, yeah, funny he blocked Josh, but then came out with an apology to fans this morning. That was also what was kind of funny because I posted what I did before the apology, or actually after the apology. So he was saying, hey, let me hear it. If I played terribly, let me hear it.
Say that.
And then he's like blocking
hear it.
everyone in sight.
I don't
So,
want to hear it.
again, like it's, obviously, I mean, I'm nobody in his world. Sure, he's maybe checking out stuff, but like, it doesn't really matter that much. But it's to the extent of like, you've seen this. There's a common thread. He says the lead by example bit, but then you go back and say, yeah, but remember last season, even when the team was not playing really well, and credit to him, I will say this, I don't mind giving him a compliment of place and how he was, because there were some games where he played well and JB was awful. Like James Bradbury played terrible. And, we made the pictures of the trash cans that came out of JB and Slay.
I forgot about that.
But then Slay goes on and makes a video, and it's the most self-serving, selfish thing that you can do to be like, hey, whoa, like, I can hear it from you guys, but I played a near perfect game. I played a near damn perfect game, and you guys are going to talk about me. He's like, okay, I could have done a couple things better, but he's like, I played good. Now, the defense as a whole, the team, we played like S. Like, it was terrible. So it's like, hang on, you're going to go out. So we have seen this thing before. I know that he deleted the tweet. He thought better of it because I'm sure the reactions that he was getting, he couldn't block enough people. He's like, let's just go ahead and delete it. But it's a similar thing. It's not a one-time offender of this sort. And so I'm like, look, you can tell a person by the character and by how they lead, and it's just not the same. And I know that he made the case or trying to make the apology. It is what it is. Ultimately, as far as the Eagles season here and play style, you need better performance regardless of what's happening with, a leader and a captain and everything else. But it's like when we start seeing these small bits and pieces of, okay, the play's not up to the same level. And wait a second, okay, this doesn't look like what you would seem to be a captain or a leader, and you have some of the vets, the older Eagles legends speaking out, going like, can you imagine if like B-Doc would have done this? Or can you imagine if we'd have,
They're
what was that? I
they're
think
cooking him on Twitter.
Corey
Yeah.
Simon was saying it, Bobby Taylor. Like there's several
Trey
guys,
Thomas said it.
Trey
Yep.
Thomas. So you're like, it's being seen and viewed by a lot of the loyal, faithful fans and everything else. So not trying to blow it extra out of proportion, but again, you look at it and say, when things are going wrong, you need the right vocal leaders to step up and do the right
Mhm.
things. And when you have veteran leadership or supposed veteran leadership that does that, it's like, man, I'm sorry, I can't. You could say it, but it's just blowing smoke because I'm not seeing it based on the actions.
And the problem is last year, right? It was watching Slay be up and down because he still has moments where he's a really good player. I think more often
For
than not,
sure.
I'm making it sound like he's like washed, but then sometimes plays well. No, he plays really well, but sometimes plays bad. But last year you were comparing him to James Bradbury, and so he looked way better than James Bradbury did the entire season. This year you're comparing him to Quinyon Mitchell, who at this point, Josh, probably should be Defensive Player of the Year. And he is all talk on the field. He'll jaw with you on the field, and you hear nothing from him after that, right? And all he's done is go out there and put together, again, a 4-game performance where you sit back and go, geez, he's been incredible. And that's what I think that that's just what Eagle fans are asking for, right? Go talk your trash on the field, back it up, and I don't want to hear from you for the rest of the week. That's it. And you can still have a podcast and tell us how much fun the game was, or you can have a podcast and be
Sure.
like, man, we got to be a lot better. I'm really pumped to come back this week. But it's like you said, the self-serving comments that I think are driving Eagle fans nuts. And again, it goes back to the fact we've been watching this for 13 straight games, basically 13 straight games. If the Eagles would have gone to the NFC title game last year and barely lost, Josh, and now they come back this year and they're 2-2 and they're talking a little bit when they shouldn't be, the amount of leash we'd be giving them right now would be infinite. My dogs have one of those, or two of those leashes where you push the button and it just goes like a tape measure all the way out. They can go for like 25 feet. We would have that for all the Eagles right now. We'd be like, go for it, whatever. You guys were great last year. They have no leash right now because they were terrible last year,
Hmm.
and we're starting to see glimpses of that again, and all of us are freaking out. You and I never had a conversation like this last year until maybe the final 2 weeks where we finally were like, okay, yes, they stink.
Hmm.
We're 4
Hmm.
games in and we're already sick of it. So
Yeah.
that's kind of where we're at. And I think if you look at the comments, a lot of people would agree. There are still plenty of people that would back them up and say we're wrong, but I think a lot of people would definitely agree.
Right. And you go to the point of I know the case obviously being made for Q being a rookie. So he
Sure,
doesn't have the leeway to speak if he wanted
sure.
to and all this other that's true. And I agree with that. But I would also say, and I think both of us would agree with this, as probably a lot of people would as well, it wouldn't be blown up to the magnitude that it is right now. I totally understand that if you're winning football games, but I would still be of the mindset if something like this happened in the midst of a really successful season.
Sure.
You're like,
Sure.
what are you doing, bro? Like,
Yeah.
you're a captain. I'm sorry. Like, there's a level of standard that you hold someone to in a leadership role and how you're being viewed optics wise around the league, around with your teammates, and to not throw shade at another teammate, to not boost yourself and to be like, oh, the team's playing like crap, but I'm playing pretty good, or I'm playing good, or remember how I have been. It's just, and if it had been a one off instance, you know what? I am a very forgiving person. And again, I know that I'm
True.
nothing in terms of Slay, but I'm just talking about as we talk about the Eagles. I
Yeah.
usually am very forgiving. Like, you know what? Hey, no big deal. Like, move on, not a big problem. But it's a continual thing. It's happened multiple times. And so I
Yeah.
guess that's why I say, like, it was maybe a little bit out of character on the stream last night, but I'd had enough. I'm like, I'm sorry. I can't stand by anymore, especially the way the season is, what we've seen from the team. It needs to be better. There's no excuses for it. Jay said, appreciate the 5, said, watch Cliff Kingsbury named for head coach pop up. Eagles
We
off
can talk
tempo
about Chris
sucks.
Kingsbury. Sure.
No one will trade for Slay. It's a wrap.
Probably true.
Interesting for the Slay trade comment there, though.
You wouldn't get much for him, right? I mean, it's just
That's the
age,
question. Yeah.
point in the career, contract. I mean, you give him a 5th, and that's what happened at the trade deadline. But the hope is that the Eagles are not at that point whenever they can, just continue to try to win instead of selling at the deadline and stuff like that. So, we'll see. We'll talk about the Commanders here in a second, though. CJ Deacon, Josh, exactly. You don't see BG going on Twitter saying all his stats from his Eagles Hall of Fame career. It's insane. Or even Cox doing that. It never happened. It's crazy to see a leader doing this. And I think that sums it up, honestly, pretty darn well. So, but again,
Perfect.
if Slay shuts down Amari Cooper and the Birds win 24-7 against the Browns in 2 weeks, it's fine. I mean, we are all going to calm down, and that's how the NFL works. But because
Well, I'll
of
calm
what we
down in
saw
terms
last
of
year,
right, and I'll calm down. I don't have a problem saying, hey, Slay played really well or Slay played really
Sure,
poorly.
sure.
It's a deeper level of leadership and captaincy and like owning up to those standards. That's the difference for me. But you're right. If he plays well, absolutely, I don't mind giving him some praise and saying, "Hey, man, he was locked down. He showed back
Yeah,
up." That passer rating allowed took a big dip in the right way. I mean, you could
yep.
finally shut down someone consistently, but ultimately, yeah, you don't
Got
want
to
to
see
keep
it.
seeing because we saw locker room issues last season, and that's where it's like, hang on, are we experiencing some similar things? Do we have the right guys to rally the troops? I know he was voted to be a captain, so again, I'm not saying that he can't rally guys. I'm not saying he's not likable. I'm not saying we've heard stories and we know stories about him mentoring Q and mentoring other DBs.
Sure.
So it's not a full blown attack on everything that he's done or what he's meant for the Eagles, but it's when you see multiple instances of this, that's the biggest question for me. And that's where it's like, I finally had to say something on that. Gallo55, appreciate the 20 bomb. Said, look
Ooh.
up all the DBs under Vic. I think you'll find a pattern. They are picked apart without a front that can get to the quarterback. Vic made his name with a Hall of Fame 49ers team. Relax with Mitchell. He's still young.
I don't think any of us was not relaxing with Mitchell. We
You know,
love Mitchell. The Fangio stuff is crazy because you and I think we try to do a very good job of calling ourselves out because we're wrong a lot. You and I both said, I mean, talked about you get Vic Fangio in there. I mean, no nonsense. He's gonna figure it out. It's not been the case, and the pass rush seems to be a problem. But Josh, I know you need a good pass rush in the National Football League. Obviously, like look at the Detroit Lions and Aiden Hutchinson. You have one player on that team that makes a massive difference. But having a great pass rush is not everything. You can have a mediocre pass rush and be just fine. Go back to the Super Bowl season in 2017. I think BG was their leading sack guy. It wasn't like they had a 15 sack guy, a 17 sack guy. Like they all kind of distributed. There's the word it around, and they were good but not great. But it just feels like this unit is just awful. They get no pressure.
yeah,
There's nothing to see here. And again, Brian Baldinger put out something I put on my show, 2-3 days ago, whatever it was, of Bryce Huff in a 4-point stance versus Bryce Huff lining up in a 2-point stance makes a difference. It's
hmm
just shocking to me that if that's the issue, Fangio doesn't see it. And so I'm having a real hard time being like, it's the players, it's the coach, is it a combination of them both? I really don't know. But for now, we're at the point where if you can't get any sort of pressure, it's going to be a lot more games like we saw with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers going forward.
it is, and there's a both sides of an element to it because you'll say you do need to get some more pressure. Overall, the Eagles have gotten a decent amount of pressure. If you just look at defensive line as a whole, I'm not saying Bryce Huff because that is a
Right,
different
right.
story. But if you look at the defensive line as a whole, they've gotten enough pressure percentage out there that could be successful, right? But the issue is it's the continued, and we said the exact same things last season. I mean, especially towards the end, but basically the entire season was what on earth? It's the marriage and the blend between all three levels of the defense, and especially with the secondary
Yeah.
and the pass rush. And when the secondary's dropped back 8 yards on almost every single throw, then this is going to be the continual theme. Now, I know that people can very very quick to point out, and we understand this. It's a Fangio style. Like that's what he
Yeah.
usually It's a bend but don't break. So you're going to see that. But I think it's at the turning point now of going into the bye week, and even Fangio kind of alluded to it. It was like, okay, we might have to play some press man. We might have to change some things up. Now, hopefully he does, because we heard the same thing from
Be
Desai. We
nice.
got to get to the quarterback. We got to adjust things. We got to make things difficult. But if you don't, then we will. We'll be sitting here saying the exact same thing from what we saw last season with the defense, that it doesn't matter if your guys can beat them. Not saying that they're doing great, but even if your guys can beat them, Baker Mayfield was getting the ball out in 1.95 seconds. Like they're
Yeah.
the fastest out of any quarterback in any NFL game this season. So I don't care what defense you are. If you're allowing the quarterback to get rid of the ball that fast, you're not going to get very many sacks. You're not going to get very many pressures. And then combine that with 18 missed tackles. Well, yeah, there's no wonder we were sitting there 21-0 early in the second quarter going, well, that's it. Ball game's over, because there's no way that you're going to slow this thing down. You need
Yeah.
wholesale changes in terms of the scheme and the game plan coming in, a little bit better in the second half, but it was still atrocious all around. So hopefully you see differences within the defense and within the bye week. I know Fangio said it, but talk is cheap at this point, and it feels like we've been saying that since 4 weeks to go last
Mhm.
season.
Mhm.
But we'll see. Brian Fleming with a 5, saying late joining. Do we still have Angry Josh? He was fantastic last night, like right
Yeah, I
off
think
the
he showed up
muscle
a
up
little bit.
bar
I
in
think you missed it
CrossFit.
by about
So
10 sort of minutes. I need
yeah,
to go
you
back
can
and
watch it
watch and
back.
see Angry Josh because I've never met Angry Josh. I can't imagine a Josh being angry.
Yeah,
So
it was about as much, especially for like a stream too. But it was about as much as I would get worked up on. So
that's probably why he blocked you then. I bet he saw it.
maybe
I mean,
I
think
you
about it.
know
Think about it, Josh. Let's toot your own horn here a little bit. If
okay,
you were an Eagles player, right, and you wanted to kind of gauge what people were saying about you, you'd go to Twitter. I guess you could listen to a
fair.
radio station if you're in your car, which very little people do these days. You're gonna go see what people say about you on YouTube, and you have the most viewed channel when it comes to the Eagles. You're probably the most influential person when it comes to the Eagles. He probably turned it on, or
Okay,
somebody
well,
texted him and said, "Hey, look what he's saying about you." Boom, and that's how you got blocked.
the
That's my
thumbnail
theory.
alone might have already just got him like,
Oh, I forgot. Yeah, you
hang
also
on.
had
So
a very Slay thumbnail.
let's just say
So
I was very, very much in the feels, I believe, as they say,
sure.
before I made that thumbnail. So it just ran right along with it. But I appreciate you saying that. Who knows? Something led to it, whether it was the tweet, whether it was the video itself. I had to talk on it. So
Yeah.
Cold Cash with a 5. What do you guys think our record will be in the next 4 games against Cleveland, New York, Cincinnati, and Jacksonville?
I do think, Josh, and again, we've been negative all night because most people are right now with the Eagles. I think this is perfectly set up to buy back into the Eagles, right? They should beat the Cleveland Browns. The Browns offense is a serious problem. It's not been that good. The Browns defense is good, but AJ Smitty back, Lane Johnson back to cover Myles Garrett, like they should be fine against the Browns. They should also beat the New York Giants. That doesn't seem to be that difficult. They should be able to do it. Who knows if they're going to have a healthy Malik Neighbors? The concussion thing is going to keep him out this week. Will he come back the week after? Then you set yourself up at 4-2 with a potential to invite the Eagle fan base back into believing in you this season versus Cincinnati Bengals. Because the Bengals have a couple of losses, right? They're 1-3. But the
Hmm.
Bengals, by that point, 3 more weeks from now, will probably be 4-3, right? The Bengals are probably going to win their next 2 games, or next 3, because we have a bye week. And that will set up a incredibly fascinating matchup on the road, afternoon, CBS versus Joe Burrow. And if you beat Joe Burrow, Jamar Chase and the Bengals, I think a lot of Eagle fans are going to buy back into what will then be a 5-2 football team and likely a 6-2 football team because the Jaguars are an absolute mess. So it is
That's
set up
true.
perfectly. I mean, the next 4 weeks are set up perfectly. But if you drop the Browns game, your coach is gone. If you drop the Giants game, goodness gracious, people are going to completely tune out. You have a
That'll be the
chance to
ultimate.
lose a
Good
close
gosh.
one to a good Cincinnati team, but then you must beat Jacksonville. But if they win the next 2 and then beat Cincinnati on the road, we are all back in like that. We are like instantly back, ready to rock. They're going to win the Super Bowl and everything's fine.
Yeah, that's true. But and that also goes with saying, assuming we know what a Cincinnati team is, right? Like before the season, I would have gone, yeah, that's going to be a difficult game. I think that they're better than certainly the 0-3 before they won the first,
Sure.
but before that. But it's a question of, okay, to what level is Cincinnati? But regardless, if you win 3 or 4 of those, for sure. I mean, it's the NFL, so it's difficult
Yeah.
to win, and especially seeing what we've done lately, it
Yeah.
doesn't really matter, especially if you have, let's say, 2 of those games. I mean, heck, even 1, but 2 of those games as like a, hey, you took care of business, like an easy win. Be able to put this one to bed at the middle of the third quarter. Don't have
Yeah.
to worry too much. None of us remember what that feels like, but if you were to have a couple of
No
those,
memory of that.
then
No
you
memory.
yes, all is well. We'd be like, hey, there's a few minor details you need to work out, but overall you're fine. You go to the Jacksonville game's a prime time matchup, Sunday Night Football.
Kelly
You
Green.
cap that off exactly. Like this game could really get good. But until we see that, it's the understandable part. On the flip side, we got a 5 from Lorenzo because we're kind of balancing, I guess, this optimism and pessimism. And it's a fair question, I guess. But hey guys, how many more losses you think before Nick gets the boot? So we talked about the wins there and the positivity. Personally, you mentioned it a second ago with the Browns game. I mean, if it gets ugly, it could just be 1. I think for me, I probably would say. I'd probably say 2 because of the schedule, and Cleveland would already be like, oh my gosh, he needs to be done if it's a loss
Yeah.
there. But with a full strength team, if you lose to Cleveland, that one is like almost there. But I could see them saying, well, something can happen. Maybe we get on a run here. But you lose to New York. division
Yeah.
that is like,
Yeah.
I'm sorry, there's no way you're coming back from that. It's 2 more
Yeah.
losses. You're 2-4. Something is drastically wrong. I don't know. I just could not see them saying, "Oh, let's ship off to Cincinnati now and continue his thing after losing 2 straight coming off of the bye week." So I would say
Yeah.
2 if you lose 2
Okay.
more.
I think that's fair. I think it would all matter. It would all depend on how you would lose the Browns game, right? If you were to lose the Browns game like
True.
the Falcons game where you should have won it, but they dropped a pass, then you can have a conversation, whatever, But if they lose the Browns game like they lost the Bucs game at full strength, right? Because that's kind of the
True, yeah.
last thing to hold on to is right. There's no AJ, there's no Smitty, Lane Johnson, the record with Lane Johnson being out. If you lose with everybody, then you have a real problem. And the Browns, man, the Browns have not been good. I was looking at their schedule. They got waxed by Dallas. They barely beat the Jacksonville Jaguars. They should have lost that game. They lost to the Giants and they lost to the Raiders this past week. Like they have been, I mean, atrocious. They have not scored more than 17, 18 points this year. Their offense is not
Mhm.
good. Deshaun Watson is looks completely washed. So that's the one that's got to be a 10+ point victory in my opinion. I don't care how good Myles Garrett is. You have 2 really good tackles. Myles Garrett should not be ruining your day versus the Bucs or the Browns. And Nick Chubb coming back is not going to get a full workload. It's not going to be vintage Nick Chubb. I mean, knock on wood, but it shouldn't be. So
Hopefully
I
not.
think I think if they were to lose badly to the Browns, then we'd have a real conversation. Because at that point, it's like, why do you need to keep Sirianni, right? Like, prove to us that that it wasn't him, right? That's what you would have to do if you want to go ahead and fire him and make sure that we understand. So
Yeah, yeah.
yeah,
It's
we'll
it's
see.
a
We'll see.
it's a scary thought with the Nick Chubb if he's full strength, but he's just coming back.
He's
They're
not.
getting into
He won't be.
practice,
He'll
so
get 10
it's
carries.
right.
Yeah,
It's not that
max.
same element, but it does need to see a lot of changes there. On the note of Myles Garrett that you brought up, Gallo here saying, "Call the Browns for Myles Garrett. They need draft picks after Watson." So, I mean,
I don't know if
it's a
I'm
cool
kind of out.
idea.
I'm out on trading for players because we have not hit on a trade. When was the last time we hit on an actual trade, right? I mean, you can even make the argument the only hit we've had so far this offseason is Saquon Barkley. Zach Bond is probably another option, but
Hmm.
in terms of actual signings, C.J. Gardner-Johnson has not been the C.J. Gardner-Johnson from 2022. He led the league in interceptions for most of that year and was just a pick machine, hard hitter, really good in coverage. He's not done any of that so far this year, and some say he's a much worse hitter and a very much definitely a worse tackler. Huff has been an absolute wash. The only reason they're
Yeah,
playing him is because they've given him $17 million, so he has to play, right? If he was making $3 million this year, he would have been benched 2 weeks ago. So Saquon has been the only good signing right now. And recent trades, go back the past couple of trade deadlines. When have they hit on anything that's been remotely good? I'm tired of wasting my draft picks and giving to people third rounders and fifth rounders for players that absolutely stink.
true. I know that you are of the same mindset of this. There's a little bit of a difference, not that it's realistic in actually making this trade, but a Miles Garrett is
Sure.
like
Yes,
that's
Myles Garrett
obviously
is.
a given.
Yes.
But if you're
Yes.
going to realistically
Max
guys that they're
Crosby, whatever.
trading, yes,
Sure.
which we got that comment too from Worf saying Raiders seem like they're having a fire sale. How he should work on the phones calling for Max Crosby. So
I love Max Crosby, but if Devontae Adams is worth a second, which I don't think, I think the Jets will give a third. I think
yeah,
you're going to see Reddick and be a part of this whole Adams thing because Adams wants to play with
hmm
Rodgers. That's very clear, and I think we'll see it by the end of the week. But if Adams is worth a third, Max Crosby is probably worth a first, and I don't think Philly wants to get rid of a first round draft pick when they're going to need a younger pass rusher in the upcoming 2024 draft. It's very clear Philly will draft a pass rusher in round 1, and they will sign a free agent defensive tackle. I will bet money on both of those things happening right now.
Yep. You know what's crazy too is the fact that going back to the trade comment is because I agree with that. You could make the case, as you said, Zach Bond, Mekhi Becton, pass blocking has been not great. Run blocking, great. Run
Yeah,
blocking, what you've seen, it's been there. It's enough that Stout's putting
he's
him in.
been
He's
fine.
playing with the injury, so
Sure.
there's some, but overall, yeah, the vast majority of moves that you make, the trades and everything, there is like okay, hit rate not so great.
Not so great.
Um, and then you also talk about like the Jahan Dotson specifically because it's the most recent.
Whew.
I mean, wow, you got a guy that's a third round pick that you gave up for, which is looking even
That's
worse
a
every
serious
single
draft
day
pick, Josh.
because right, and it's an even worse situation. Not that when you made this trade you thought it would be happening, but the Miami Dolphins, it's the Dolphins pick. So it's a very, very good third round selection, which I
Mhm.
mean, no signs
Great
that
point.
Miami is turning this thing around. So it's going to
Nope.
be a top 75 easily pick in the NFL draft that you gave
Gone.
up for a guy who has 5 catches and 25 yards. And by the
Mhm.
way, that's 5 catches, 25 yards with AJ Brown missing 3 games and Devontae Smith missing one and a half of those games. So yeah, out of all the misses, that's probably the most
It's a
glaring
big one.
right now.
It's a big one.
Washington is celebrating. The good for them. Have a good start and have that draft pick.
Listen,
But
Washington, for 2 seconds here before we get I see Andrew Myers super chat here. Washington's legit. I mean, Jane Daniels is not gonna complete 86% of his passes every game this year. He looks really good, and they have a very mature coaching staff, and they went and signed Bobby Wagner, who I mocked in the offseason. Talk about, a mature leader on defense. Zach Ertz is obviously still there. They have a great defensive line. They're very serious. And if I was the Commanders, I'd be calling for Devontae Adams right now because you have a rookie contract on your with your quarterback. You could spend money and extend him for a 3-year deal, make
mhm.
him happy. They are very legit right now. And so giving him a third round draft pick to play with next year, which should be a better Jaden Daniels. We're seeing Texans like, revitalizations with a defensive minded head coach coming over, fixing the roster, getting the quarterback with a second overall draft pick. It's definitely scary. I would say it's very scary.
Yeah, and if they either pair that up, as you say, if they were to swoop in and get a Devontae Adams situation
Scary.
with a Terry McLaurin, or you
Scary.
wait till the draft and just utilize that draft pick. But
Mhm.
there's dangerous things. We see the division, but I think it's clear cut if you're talking about what the prime candidate is in terms of competition and who we're battling with. It's
Yeah.
without a doubt. You could see that naturally just the record, but you see within the team makeup and what they have, it's without a doubt the Commanders. So
Yep.
I'm going to get to Andrew. There's also Daryl real quick too with the 20 bomb. Appreciate that. So I'd
There
encourage
you
you
go.
guys to look at the review done by Philly Film Room. It explains the issues with the defense. I believe it's a mix of personnel and scheme. If the players continue missing tackles, no amount of scheme will help.
Fair. Fair. Tackles
Yeah.
is fair. And I think I've seen the Philly Film Room's guys stuff. Let me make sure
Yeah,
this
yeah.
is who I'm talking about because
They're
he has some really good stuff.
yeah, they do some great stuff. Nick and Eric. So yeah, definitely shout out to them. But if
Yes,
you're not
I've watched his
following,
channel.
for
Yeah, yeah,
sure,
yeah.
yeah, make
This is
sure
a
to
very good channel. Very good
subscribe to
channel.
them. Great breakdowns.
Mhm.
There's I mean, they were right because I was watching some of them, especially within the defensive side. The like Fangio's scheme and system is going to put a lot of players in situations to make one-on-one tackles.
Mhm.
Is it the best situation there? Do you really like asking someone to tackle a guy in space with 7 yards of separation or wherever it ends up being? Probably not
Yeah.
necessarily, but that's what the Eagles elected for. They knew what they were getting with a Vic
It's true.
Fangio
It's
scheme.
true.
But yeah, I mean, it doesn't matter honestly what defensive scheme. You could be Brian Flores, the Vikings defense that's unstoppable right now. If they
Great.
miss 18 tackles in a game, I don't care what you're calling. You're
Yep.
going to lose that game. Your defense is going to be terrible. So, good call out though. Yes, if you're not following, make sure to follow Philly Film Room. A lot of good content. Andrew's here. Let me make sure and get to that one too because you called that one. How much do you guys think Kellen Moore is actually running the offense? Here we go. Saw Anthony DeBono's post on Twitter with the motion percentages. Mhm.
I have a show coming out on that tomorrow, so stay tuned, subscribe. But the
Okay.
preview is it's very weird. And the problem is that you take week 1 where they motion 60% of the time, and you take this past week where it's like 20% of the time, and you go, how is that the same offense? Like, how is it in Kellen Moore's mind deciding to go from this to go to that? And motion is not just window dressing. Motion unlocks defenses and gives you the opportunity to know what's coming at you. And they did a ton of that versus Green Bay. Jalen made a ton of incredible checks at the line to get out of bad plays into hot routes, switching from passes to runs and vice versa. He didn't do a lot of that versus the Bucs. And again, we are not film guys, we are not coaching experts, but 60% to 20% pre-snap motion drop between games, wild. There's a really crazy passing chart of Dallas Goedert's usage in the Saints win versus Dallas Goedert's route running in the Bucs loss. It's night and day difference. It's not close. And you start to just think, okay, either Kellen Moore is coaching differently in these 4 weeks, which doesn't make a lot of sense because you've had some good offensive days and some bad offensive days, or something else is happening. And I'm going to mention in my video tomorrow, I'm prepping this show. We will never know how much Nick Sirianni is sabotaging, and you had a really good video on that a couple of days ago. We don't know. But that's our best guess right now as to why things look so different. Green Bay versus where they were with the Saints versus what they did with the Falcons. And then, of course, last week versus the Bucs. So it's weird. It's very, very weird. And Kellen Moore is not going to throw him under the bus. Like, he's not going to just, say, hey, it's Sirianni's fault. But something is going on with the offense to make it change. And you can say it's AJ not being there, but pre-snap motion doesn't depend on AJ because it's position based. You're the X, you're the Y, you got a motion to show if we're on man. It shouldn't make a big difference. So I don't know. I mean, again, most of this we don't know. We're not in the locker room, but it's when there's smoke, there's fire somewhere, and obviously there's been a lot of smoke the past couple of days.
And they've talked about it's funny because obviously great minds think alike, and we're talking about the same content and everything. But similarly, I've got things talking about the offense because I saw those numbers as well. So I'll probably have, I don't know, I'm interested to watch yours and see, because we don't share, like most people probably, I think we've talked about it, we don't share notes most of the time beforehand.
Not
and
at
sometimes it'll post and be like, oh, yeah, hey, that's a good point. We were talking about the same thing. But I am curious to see that from the standpoint of, like, as you said, Kellen Moore, and we've seen changes throughout the last couple weeks. And what is he doing? What is he not doing? And then they talk about going into the bye week in the press conference and Jalen saying we don't really have an identity and we're still needing to find one. And then Sirianni echoing the same thing of being like, well, most teams don't really have their identity right now. Like, they're still trying to work through it. And even Kellen Moore saying the early starts, the non-existent early starts that we're not seeing from this team of like, oh yeah, it's fun. That's an opportunity for us through this bye week to try to figure something out. It's like, I don't know. I don't know if that means, because Sirianni was, there might be, or there could be some fundamental changes. Hopefully that's a legit, like, yes, there's fundamental changes and I'm taking a back seat, but it's hard to necessarily believe him and go up there and say, there's going to be fundamental changes. And by me saying that, that's me, bowing out of this thing. Like, I don't know. It would be good if it is, because, I would like to see what is a full-on Kellen Moore offense, him in charge, putting together the game plan, with the guys having confidence. But, I think that it's just the continual thing that as we've said, Sirianni's so entrenched in the offense. He's an offensive-minded guy that it's kind of, well, hey, what about this? Hey, this thing kind of worked too. This was one of our key plays. I've seen this here. And it's like you're giving Kellen Moore the keys to the car, but you have the governor, you have it restricted where he can only go like 60 miles an hour. You're like,
feels that way sometimes.
Back away and just let him have full reign to just take off.
Yep. I agree.
It's ridiculous.
Dante with the 10. He says, I feel like we need a new coach to set the tone like Dan Campbell coach, like be perfect for this team. And City teams always start slow, only team to not score in the first quarter. I think that's where Vrabel's name really pumps up. It gives you a lot of excitement for a name like that, because it seems like he could be a Dan Campbell type guy. Campbell has gotten very fortunate because he has an incredible offensive coordinator, and I think that is a massive, massive plus for Dan Campbell, because the early Dan Campbell years, it was kind of like, I don't know, is he a little too weird, rah rah rah. But because the offense is so good, they all buy into him now, and the defense follows suit. And Goff is now a Pro Bowler. I think that he is
we saw the Philly special. We saw the Detroit special.
They looked great. And Seattle's not a joke. Seattle's got a pretty serious defense. They hired a defensive coach. So I agree. I think it's harder to do. You got to get the right offensive coordinator. And so we obviously have to see who, Vrabel would hire. And not like Vrabel's offense has been that great, because it's just been Derrick Henry, and that's basically it. So we'll see.
That's true. His GM didn't even want to keep A.J. Brown. So, I feel bad for the guy, because what are you gonna do? I mean, when your main playmaker's like, hey, by the way, we're trading this dude. We don't think that he can be that successful. So we thank them for that. But John M with Super Chat here talking about the offense here. Here you go. The 10 bomb with the run the ball. So that's the it's the
sounds
answer.
like a really good idea.
Could run the ball.
But what do we know, Josh? We're just YouTube content creators. We don't know anything about utilizing your best player by far in the first 3 drives. It's like, maybe, I don't know. I mean,
especially without AJ and Smitty.
What do I know?
It feels like if you're going to go into a game, you might see that.
What do I know?
I know the comment was beforehand, like Sirianni saying, what was it? Oh, we only had 6 plays. So the 6 plays, two carries, but he was taking away the third downs, which is like, okay, you're not going to run on a 3rd and long, but you basically threw it on almost every single first down. So then you're all of a sudden behind the chains, and you're not going to run the football. And yeah, I'm with you. It's like one of those where it seems so blatantly obvious.
Yeah.
And you go away from it to, I don't know, suspecting or thinking the defense is going to, oh, they've got Saquon, they're out with the receivers, so we're going to make sure and shut down the run. So let's go out there and throw them off, right? Like it's okay for one drive, but ultimately, when teams beat you on either side, it is 90% of the time with the playmakers that they have, with the guys that are dominant, and you say, you know what, we have an offensive line that even if we've had a little bit of pass protection struggles, they have still been good at run blocking. The 5 yards a carry on average for the Eagles as a whole, Saquon Barkley, higher than that, and his performance is like, why are we trying to make this thing too difficult? But like you say, it's obviously more complicated, because no one fully understands it, yet they continue not to run the football. So
what do we know?
It is strange.
All right, geez, that was probably the fastest hour we've ever done on this show.
I think
I
you're right.
Blinked, it's 8:30.
Like, wow,
how about
that's
that?
crazy. Appreciate you guys hanging out though. That was a interesting. I kind of call it like after the losses, like therapy sessions, I suppose.
It kind of feels like it. Yeah.
Like last night was a venting session for me. It may be a therapy, but more of just venting, and then kind of a therapy session just to talk through changes and what we're going to see. But it's a bye week, It's a good thing that we got it this early. I
can't lose this week.
I guess that's the win. That's the positive to come from it.
Just beat the Browns, look good doing it, and everything's going to be just fine, right? It's that simple. That's all it takes.
I was going to actually ask you this beforehand, but now that we're live, no time like the present to put you on the spot. Do we know if we're going to potential stream? Do you know yet? If not,
don't know yet. Maybe,
okay. Right.
Maybe I might go to town this weekend. I haven't decided yet.
Okay.
But we also might.
Where
not,
would you go? We're talking about as we wrap it up with hypotheticals here.
But it's supposed to rain at the beach is the problem. So it's like, do I want to drive 5 hours to the beach just to sit in the rain? That's we're kind of waiting to see if it clears up maybe by tomorrow to make the decision. But not looking good. But if not, then probably going to be here.
Okay. All right. Well, stay tuned then. As always, I mean, we'll be going live if the Eagles make a trade, if they do anything crazy, if they fire someone. I mean, you never know, but probably less likely for something like that.
Yeah.
But if there's anything, make sure to subscribe, keep the notifications turned on, and appreciate you guys. Oh, there's one in Super Chat. Let me make sure. Actually, a couple that just came in. Hit these at the buzzer. Eduardo, as always, we appreciate him, though. Says, who and when will you guys replace Nick? I guess who will you with, and when will you guys replace
Probably
Nick?
that by the end of this year for sure. Unless they win the divisional round, I would say. I think that's kind of his threshold. And I think that they would probably pick Belichick if I had to bet money on it. Vrabel, Ben Johnson, Bobby Slowick, those are all names that I think make sense. It's probably one of those four, right? But I think that they would go Bill Belichick. And not saying that I would, because I wouldn't. Out of those four, he'd be my fourth on that list. But I think they would probably try Bill. There's something about Bill. I think the owner loves Bill. I think Bill's been hovering. He made a lot of comments about Philadelphia. I think it'd be Bill if I had to guess. Right now, if I had to guess.
Yeah, sadly, that's probably where I'd go with. My top choice would be Ben Johnson, but realistically,
Johnson, Slowick, Vrabel, any of those three is fine. And then I would go with Belichick. So,
and then here we go. CJ with the 5. Come on. When are y'all going to do a way too early mock draft? We're a long ways off. Even with the
pass rusher,
the season would have to be. I mean, we'd have to for sure playoffs out of question. Even then, I mean, my gosh, I don't start any of that until the NFL season ends, because who knows where people are going to be at. But I don't know if the season got totally wheels off and we're just needing to kill time. I guess we always could.
Guess.
You never know.
That would stink.
That would be, I might just be like, no, it's not even
pass rusher. Good one at Ohio State. There's a good one at Ole Miss. There's a good one. Where's the other good one? I'm forgetting. There's a third. There might be another one at Ohio State. There's a really good one at Ohio State, but he probably get traded to get him. So edge rusher. Let's just say that. So there you go.
Okay. All right. Well, again, appreciate you guys hanging out. It was blast as always. Went longer than even anticipated, but it was super quick. So enjoy the bye week, everyone. Hopefully you got plans. Take advantage of it. Thomas, hopefully, I mean, the weather maybe clears up for y'all.
Probably
Otherwise,
not.
If
Probably
not, we will see you guys. Thomas is not drinking moonshine for people asking.
It's literally water. I promise.
It looks like it, though.
Water.
You got the mason jar.
Can you imagine drinking this much moonshine? It was like full.
it would. I think the mood would be a little bit different if you had been. So, but it was. I wouldn't say fun. It was all right. It was good hanging out. So
There you go.
Appreciate everybody. Again, we'll see you next time. Until then, you know what it is. Go Birds.
Go Birds.